Coming up on Network Africa today, South Africa offers to help mediate in the Israel-Gaza conflict between Israel. Egypt rejects humanitarian corridors at Rafah border point for civilians. Plus, lawyers for wife of Gabon's deposed president, Sylvie Bongo, is jailed after being charged with money laundering and forgery. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Anne Nwawadu. We begin in South Africa, where President Cyril Ramaphosa says he is ready to mediate in the conflict between Israel and the Palestinian authorities. In a statement released on Thursday, President Ramaphosa is calling for an immediate ceasefire, saying his country can draw on the experience of conflict resolution in Africa and beyond. The South African president says the atrocities against civilians are deeply concerning and is now calling for the immediate and unconditional opening of humanitarian corridors to reach people in need. Electricity, water and fuel supplies to the Gaza Strip have all been cut off by Israeli authorities, who they say will only end the blockade once all Israeli hostages have returned. In the meantime, tensions were high in Johannesburg outside the United States of America consulate after dozens of people staged a protest to denounce Israel for what they call oppression of Palestinians. During that protest, a scuffle broke out when one Israeli supporter staged a counter-demonstration, causing pro-Palestinian supporters to heckle him. But South African police then guarded the man, rushing him into a police vehicle, averting any further clash. In Cape Town as well, dozens of supporters and protesters gathered outside the South African Jewish Museum, holding placards calling for the freedom of Palestine.
Raping babies, beheading babies. Show me, I'm here. I'm standing in front of you. I'm standing in front of you. I'm on my own.
Why are you protecting him? He's standing in front of the American embassy here. And this is a message to the United States and all their supporters. If you love Israel as much as you claim to do, take them all to America. Exactly. We don't need them. Remove the cancer from the world. There's more than enough space in the United States. Take them to the Midwest. Take them to Wisconsin. Put them in Seattle or New York. We don't care.
We cannot go to Palestine. We would be prepared to even be sandbags in defense of the people of Palestine. But this is the very least that we can do, to be here, to show a message, to send a message to the people of Gaza in Palestine in particular, to say, we are with you. With our effort, with our sweat, with our blood, we are with you.
If we are against white supremacy and colonialism all over the world, we have to support the demands for the Palestinian people and the fight for decolonization and the fight against white supremacist Zionist Israel that is occupying stolen land that belongs to the indigenous people of Palestine.
Our South African correspondent, Innocent Samosa, joins us now for more discussions on this. Hello, Innocent. It's good to have you on Network Africa.
A very good evening to you and our viewers around the world. Good to see you.
Okay, so do tell us more about the statement released from the presidency offering to help mediate in the Israel-Hamas conflict. What is the plan for doing this?
Indeed, and devastating scenes coming out of Gaza and Israel. In fact, Israel's bombing campaign continues. One would categorize this as a humanitarian crisis. And of course, it has caused many divisions around the world, including here in South Africa, including politicians. And in fact, President Cyril Ramaphosa was in Parliament earlier on. He was inundated with questions from members of Parliament about South Africa's stance with regards to this particular conflict in that region. But of course, we understand that they've since issued a statement from the Department of International Relations saying that they advocate for peace. In fact, they said that they're working with international relations, international community to basically calibrate some sort of peace in that particular region. But you and I know that for that to happen, both nations would have to do many compromises, and as it stands, it would seem like nobody wants to basically compromise.
But African countries seem to be divided in their reactions to this war. Some are on the Palestine side, some are on the Israeli side. But what is the position of South African government in this war?
Well, the South African government they have always spoke about the non-alignment stance. You would remember even the Ukraine-Russia conflict, the current Ukraine-Russia conflict. They say that they are taking non-alignment stance, where they say that they advocate for peace. So it does look like they're still going with peace in this particular conflict, but to some people, some commentators have been saying that it seems as though the South African government or South African ruling parties leaning towards Palestine. And I'm saying this because of the comments that were made by the Deputy Secretary General of the African National Congress on radio earlier on, when she was speaking about this particular conflict, saying that in fact she was mostly focusing on what. Yeah, just to pick it up from there, I'm saying the allegations that are leveled by Israel to Hamas are being, overlooked by the African National Congress. So I guess that's why some people and some quarters here in South Africa feel that the African National Congress, in many respects, lean towards, Palestine.
But we also understand that Johannesburg and Cape Town are two cities that have seen pro-Palestinian protests, one of which almost went out of hand when an Israeli supports a status counter demonstration. People moved in to attack him. But what more can you tell us about what happened, and also the situation of that Israeli man who we saw was rushed into the police vehicle?
Yeah, we understand that he sustained some few injuries, and he was rushed to the hospital, and reports are that he's receiving medical attention. But I guess it was a little bit disingenuous for him to basically go to that, type of protest when you're not pro that protest, because tensions were essentially high. So for him to do that, it was a little bit disingenuous. And there was another one here in Johannesburg where the South African Federation of Trade Union was also protesting outside the U.S. consulate. You would know that USA has now come out to support Israel. In fact, Israel also said that they are not retaliating. They are basically, targeting the enemy. But also, there has been lots of, commentators who suggest that Hamas possibly have seen that there has been a lot of challenges in Israel. For example, the protests that they were calling for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to step aside. That also, from a distance, Hamas thought they would basically, infiltrate and destabilize the government of Israel. But it would seem like right now, the politicians in Israel are now coming together. In fact, even the opposition parties, the likes of Blue and White Party, the leader, Benny Gantz, who is also, former chief of staff, he is also part of Likud, which is led by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, to basically calibrate some sort of a military war room, which is going to deal with this particular conflict. So where I'm sitting, it does look like this conflict is far from over. As I'm speaking to you, the bombing is now continuing, and the South African Federation of Unions here in South Africa is siding with Palestine. They're saying that they were running behind the banner of #FreePalestine.
But all right, Innocent, but there have been protests also supporting Israel and Palestine all around the world. It's not just in one part. What do the South African public feel about what is currently going on in Israel and in Gaza, the general public in South Africa, not just those protesting?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of mixed reactions, as I've indicated in my opening remarks, and that a lot of people really, it has divided a lot of people in terms of, religion, ideology, and policy and politics. And also, I was actually talking to one friend of mine who is based in Palestine, in a place called Nablus, and she was telling me that she's got family in Gaza, where they're still actually looking for some family members who are actually stuck there. But here in South Africa, there's been lots of mixed reactions. For example, the likes of the Democratic Alliance, which is the main opposition party in South Africa, has been standing solemnly with Israel, and they're condemning the South African government for being lukewarm in terms of them taking the non-alignment stance. They're saying that South African government should essentially condemn Palestine, and the South African government is not willing to essentially do that. So it has really divided a lot of people in terms of religion, as I've indicated, in terms of, how people think, how people perceive the world and look at ideology and, how they essentially perceive life. So it has really divided a lot of people in.
All right, thank you very much. South Africa correspondent Innocent Samusa, thanks for your contribution on Network Africa.
Thank you, colleague.
And Egypt has said it is directing international flights from and for Gaza through an airport in northern Sinai. Cairo has also asked Israel to avoid targeting the Rafah crossing from Egypt into Gaza, which was bombed several times earlier this week. An Egyptian man is pleading for help in reuniting with his family that he says are stranded in Gaza. His wife is a Palestinian and had traveled with their child to visit her family in Gaza to celebrate her brother's wedding.
Hani al-Shafi says his world has collapsed when he heard that his Palestinian wife and 6-month daughter are stuck in Gaza under heavy Israeli airstrikes. The 29-year-old father published 2 videos appealing to evacuate his family to Egypt. At his home in Cairo, Shafi says he feels helpless and fears for the safety of his wife and daughter.
Everyone was asking me about what happened. I had no idea until my wife told me what happened. Unfortunately, there was an airstrike.
Shafi married 27-year-old Palestinian last year. She had traveled to visit her family in Gaza and celebrate her brother's wedding. Right after the escalating situation, she attempted to flee the Strip and headed for the Rafah border crossing on Tuesday. But the crossing was hit by an airstrike, leaving his wife stranded in Rafah, running out of supplies and baby formula for his daughter.
At that time, her siblings took her to the border crossing in order to take her to safety, and they bid farewell to her. Unfortunately, she was torn between leaving her family or come here and be with her husband and daughter. It felt horrible for me. They hit a place like the border crossing. Imagine what they will do inside in Palestine.
Clutching his baby's clothes and desperately trying to communicate with his wife, Shafi pleads to let his wife pass the border that is now closed indefinitely due to heavy airstrikes.
I miss them. Home without them feels so bad. Everything is bad without them. I cannot eat. I cannot sleep. I cannot work. I cannot live my normal life at all.
Al-Shafi's predicament is one of many situations Israelis, Gazans and other nationals are facing. They lost or dead loved one, with some others missing, and numerous family members.
And still ahead on Network Africa. King Charles to embark on a state visit to Kenya, coinciding with the country's 60th independence anniversary. We'll bring you details of this and more. Please stay with us. Welcome back. As collation and counting continues in the Liberian general elections, the African Union and ECOWAS have all asked parties to stick with their commitment with the March 28 Fermenting Declaration, where they promised to abide by peaceful conduct before, during and after the elections. At a joint press briefing today, both parties gave their preliminary findings on the elections, which they say were largely peaceful, showing the commitment of the Liberian people to consolidate on their democracy. They made a few observations of skirmishes which led to deaths during the campaigns, but they did not have a huge impact on the conduct of the elections. They also made some recommendations asking the government of Liberia to pay attention to road infrastructure in the country, while asking that constitutional changes be made to allow elections be held in the dry season. ECOWAS also appealed to candidates and supporters to wait for the official declaration of results by the National Electoral Commission, the body constitutionally empowered to do so. And in Mali, the ruling junta say they are still examining Air France's request to resume flights in the country. But earlier this week, the airline said it will start flying to Mali again from Friday onward, saying that it had reached a deal with the transitional authorities. However, this was later contradicted by the Mali's Transport Ministry, which said that it is still considering the request to start flying to the country, and it remains suspended for the time being. Mali also accused the airline of having unilaterally suspended flights earlier without properly informing the authorities and customer beforehand. But Air France has since said that it is postponing flights to and from Mali until further notice. Relations between the former colonial power France and Russia-allied Mali have hit rock bottom since the 2020 military coup. This August, France's national airline stopped flying to Mali in the wake of the military coup in neighboring Niger. Lawyers for the wife of Gabon's deposed President Ali Bongo Ondimba say that she has been jailed. Sylvia Bongo, who had been under house arrest, was accused of embezzling public funds. Last month, she was charged with money laundering, receiving stolen property, forgery, and the use of forgery. But lawyer Francois Zimere said that her jailing on Wednesday was arbitrary and an illegal procedure. Mrs. Bongo's husband was forced from office in the month of August. The military seized power soon after Ali Bongo was declared the winner of Gabon's presidential election. He had been in office since 2009 when he succeeded his father, who had ruled the country for 41 years. Let's head to Cameroon now, where authorities have denied abandoning victims of the deadly landslide in the capital, Yaoundé. Sunday's landslide in the low-income Mbankolo neighborhood left at least 31 people dead and destroyed homes, displacing many families. The local administrator in charge of coordinating emergency assistance said that people complaining of not having a place to stay had chosen not to go to the temporary accommodation provided by the government. According to officials, some homeless victims opted to join their family members elsewhere, while about 16 others were being taken care of at the center several kilometers away from the disaster site. But so far, about 40 families have received assistance from the government, and more are expecting to get theirs. And in Kenya, the health ministry is set to end a 6-year agreement that allowed more than 100 Cuban doctors work in Kenyan hospitals. Health Minister Susan Nakachumia says that the move will help address challenges faced by Kenyan health workers, including the lack of employment opportunities. Back in 2017, an agreement established an exchange program where Cuban doctors will help fill the gap in county hospitals, while Kenyans will travel to Cuba for specialized medical training. It was unpopular with the Kenyan medical professionals, who argued that local doctors had the requisite training just as the Cuban counterparts did. But previously, doctors and other health workers in Kenya have often gone on strike, demanding higher wages, better working conditions, and for more doctors to be hired. The UN Refugee Agency says the displaced crisis following the conflict in Sudan continues unabated, with nearly 6 million people forced out of their homes inside and outside of the country. According to the UNHCR, those who have fled faced harrowing journeys, with families being separated during flights and increased gender-based violence. The conflict in Sudan, which started nearly 6 months ago, is said to be witnessing a major crisis of malnourished children and disease outbreaks.
This is one of the largest protection crises that we have been faced with, that we are faced with today. Nearly 6 months and nearly 6 million people affected who are living. And I would say inside Sudan itself, there are a lot of people in urban settings who are affected equally and who do not have the resources to live. I have seen and I have witnessed the level of human rights violations that have happened within Sudan, so that what we hear from people who have crossed the borders is really heartbreaking. And that's the protection crisis that we are faced with, and it has been ongoing for the past 6 months.
In my long career as a humanitarian worker, what I have seen in Chad with this new emergency, with such a rapid and vast displacement of people, is the first time. Chad, we estimate probably that by the end of the year, we will reach, unfortunately, the number of 600,000 Sudanese refugees who have just arrived following what's happening in Sudan.
We have received over 300,000 Sudanese since the crisis erupted. And for those who don't know, in Egypt already, pre-crisis, there is 6 million Sudanese.
The deputy representative of UNICEF in Nigeria, Mrs. Aurora Khan, is asking for more commitment from the Nigerian government at all levels to address the needs of the girls and the women. Speaking at an event to mark the 2023 International Day of the Girl Child in Abuja, Mrs. Khan explains that teenage girls should not encounter any problems in realizing their full potential.
It's another time to celebrate girls, and this time, schoolgirls, development partners and government officials are converging on this hall to deliberate on how to make life better for girls and women. The theme for this year's celebration is Invest in Girls' Rights. A report by UNICEF shows that there are 25.8 million adolescent girls in Nigeria, with 7 million of them out of school. However, development partners are pledging their commitment to protect and empower young girls.
Here in Nigeria, the United Kingdom has demonstrated over decades of partnership that we are a genuine and enduring partner to grassroots organisations and other allies, old and new, including UNICEF. Through these partnerships, we reaffirm our commitments to putting girls and women at the centre of our operations and our investments.
Let us take an action to ensure that girls are at the centre of all the discussion, but keeping an eye on the most vulnerable girls. The girls' voice should guide everything we do, and we really need to create space for girls to lead and amplify their voices.
The wife of the governor of Kwara State is the chairperson of the Nigeria Governor's Wives Forum, and she is optimistic of the future of the girl child, while encouraging girls to put in their best to achieve their desires towards nation building.
Don't let any sector be a taboo for you, and try and do all that you can to represent girls well, to represent women well, and I look forward to seeing all of you in the future, right? So I look forward to looking at the TV one day and saying, I know her. You know, I knew her when she was 12 years old, and I know you can do it.
The past 10 years has seen young girls affected by conflicts, forcing them out of schools. For some others, poverty and child marriages have limited them from achieving their potentials.
The parents won't want to be in trouble actually with the girl, so they don't want to be in that trouble of having the girl kidnapped or having them harassed in any way or molested in any way. So the government should actually give give space for more education to girls, and then security should also be tightened.
With more commitment from government at all levels, issues affecting young girls in Nigeria can be reduced to the barest minimum.
And finally, Kenya's President William Ruto has invited King Charles for a state visit at the end of this month. Buckingham Palace says the king is expected to acknowledge painful aspects of the UK's history in the East African country when he visits. But the trip alongside his wife Camilla was announced on Wednesday at the invitation of President Ruto. And this will be the third foreign trip by the royals since Queen Elizabeth II died in September last year. It will be King Charles's fourth official visit to Kenya. And that's it on Network Africa. Thank you for watching. I'm Anne Nwawadu.